Hey there, today we're going to get into something that's, it's pretty personal and for a lot of people pretty painful, but it's so important for understanding why some families just drift apart. We're going to talk about the long-term effects of parental absence and what creates that deep distance between parents and their adult kids. So let's just start with this idea right here, because it's really the heart of everything we're going to cover. This quote, it kind of reframes the whole issue, doesn't it? It says that absence isn't just an empty space. It's actually a lesson, an active form of training. And that's the concept we're really going to dig into together. All right, so that brings us to our first big point, this painful misunderstanding. This is usually where the conflict bubbles up, right? An aging parent wants their kids to be close, but the adult child just feels this huge gap between them. And everyone's left wondering, why? Why is there so much distance? And here's the core of the problem. A parent might really want their kids to show up, to be there for them emotionally, but they've forgotten that they never really showed them how. Now, look, this usually doesn't come from a bad place. Parents are often just trying to get by, dealing with money stress, pressure from work, or maybe just repeating the same patterns they grew up with. But whatever the reason, the blueprint for closeness was never provided. They never modeled what that kind of presence and affection actually looks like day to day. And this idea leads us straight into our next section, the unintentional training. Let's break down how this emotional distance wasn't some random accident. It was actually a behavior that was taught and learned over a whole childhood. Take a look at how we're defining parental absence here. It's not just about a parent not being physically in the room. It's a type of conditioning. It's where a child learns to get by, to literally survive without all those essential emotional things we need, like affection and feeling loved on purpose. So what did that lesson plan look like? Well, kids learned that you can love someone from far away, that you can care about them, but quietly, without really engaging. They learned that you don't really need to check in on people, that you don't have to say, I love you. And these aren't just little habits. This becomes their core understanding of how relationships are supposed to work. And here's the part that's so easy to miss. The adult child's distance now, their quietness, it's not them rejecting the parent. It's actually a sign that they were a really good student. They learned the lesson they were taught, and they learned it so well that they became completely self-sufficient. They had to. So what happens years later? This brings us to what we're calling the harvest of absence. This is where we look at the real concrete consequences that grew from the seeds of that training that were planted so long ago. And we're not just talking about hurt feelings. The impact goes way deeper than that. The source material for this points to a ton of well-documented psychological effects. We're talking about really serious things like depression, anxiety, a constant feeling of loneliness, issues that can absolutely shape a person's entire life. And it's so important to get this. These problems don't just pop up out of the blue. They're the result of a slow burn. They're built up over years and years of silence, of emotional needs just not being met time and time again. So when a parent starts to notice this distance, how do they usually react? Well, unfortunately, the go-to response is often the exact opposite of what's needed. And that brings us to section 4. Guilt is not the answer. I mean, just look at the difference here. On the one hand, you have the approach that just makes everything worse, using guilt. The parent basically says, why are you so cold? Why won't you give me something I never gave you? But then look at the other side. That's the path to actually fixing things. It's taking accountability. It's the parent saying, you're right. I didn't teach you this. I didn't show you how. Let's try to learn together. And this, right here, is why trying to guilt someone into being close will always fail. You can't just tell your kid to be present. They learned from what they saw you do, day in and day out for their whole life. Your actions, or your lack of action, that's what taught the real lesson. So if guilt is out, what actually works? Well, it's pretty simple. An adult child who is essentially learning a brand new skill needs support. They need grace when they mess up. They need some guidance on how to even do this. And they need a lot of patience. The single biggest thing that gets in the way of all that? Parental ego. That need to be right. That inability to just say, I messed up. Okay, so after all that, let's talk about the good news. There is a way forward. That brings us to our final and honestly most hopeful part of this explainer, the path to healing. Let's look at how you can actually start to bridge that painful gap. It all starts with this first powerful shift. The path forward isn't paved with guilt. It's paved with truth. It's about being able to look at the situation and acknowledge what really happened without trying to pretty it up. And the next step builds right on top of that. This isn't about blaming anyone or painting parents as villains. It's about accountability. It's about a parent being able to own their part in the dynamic, whether they meant to teach that lesson or not. And finally, the third piece of this foundation for healing is moving away from any kind of manipulation and toward real humility. And that just means letting go of the ego, admitting you don't have all the answers, and being willing to learn right alongside your child. We have to end by making this crystal clear. This whole conversation is not about attacking parents. So many parents were just doing the best they could with the tools they had, often coming from their own broken backgrounds. The point here isn't to place blame. It's a call for truth and accountability, because that is the only way that real, lasting healing can ever begin. And so we'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. It's a question that really applies to everyone, whether you're the parent or the child in this story. Healing always starts with acknowledging reality, with seeing things as they actually are and how they got that way. The only question left is, are you ready to see it?